This is going to be kind of similar to Matt's talk. So this is hacking into another hospital. This is specifically an engagement that I did. It was specifically social engineering. So a little bit about myself for those who may not know me. My name is James Donlin. I do pen testing slash security consulting at a company called Optiv, which is based in Denver, but I live here in Charlotte. I've only been there for about a year now, so I'm still pretty new to a lot of this stuff. So about this talk and about this project that I did, this is another medical corporation. This was a very large engagement that we were doing. It was multi-component, so we were doing their internal network, their perimeter, wireless pen testing, which ended up being remote, and then social engineering. And I was on the social engineering, and that consisted of what we call phone pretexting calls and phishing. And a cool thing about this one is the customer wanted post exploitation to be in scope, which is not very typical for SE. Usually, the way it works is if you gain network access, you basically just prove like you ping a DC or something, show that you're pulling an address, and then that's it. Like you have to stop. But this one was really cool. They literally said, see how far you can get if you get on the network. And as we saw earlier, medical clients tend to have serious flaws in security. This is another example of that. So a little bit about phishing and phone pretexting. Phishing is not easy in 2020, at least it shouldn't be. When you're doing it for a red team assessment or pen testing, a lot of setup is required. And at least for our company, we usually have the client whitelist our phishing domain because we want to test human security, not necessarily their security controls. So, if emails start getting blocked, then it kind of hampers the actual results of who clicked on it or whatever. And with phishing, it's pretty cool because you can pretty much do whatever you want as long as the client approves of it. So we try to get creative with our pretexting and the scenarios that we put forward. So yeah, I started off the assessment a few weeks before by creating a web page, bought a domain that I'm not going to show, but it's similar to the client name by one character essentially. That's kind of why I can't show it. And as part of the process of buying your domain, you want to make sure that you age it out a little bit. So, if you buy something brand new and then immediately start using it for phishing, that's going to be blocked all over the place. And also, you can categorize a domain. So I had this categorized as generic / medical. You'll typically see like medical categories and financial stuff is usually whitelisted from the get-go by a lot of clients. Make sure you have valid SSL certs and whatever. And essentially what the page did is they would go to it and it's a fake login prompt. All it does is save their credentials. But from the user's side, when they signed in, it actually looked pretty cool. It had like a little prompt and everything, and it said that they successfully logged in. So I was pretty proud of that. So this is my email for the phishing. It's pretty straightforward. Essentially, we're just saying, hey, the company is deploying a new cloud platform, and like, it's kind of a buzzword, like cloud. Like, what does that mean? And it's just saying, they can download software, access their email, etc. Blah blah blah. And as part of that, you want to make sure that it's not too specific because I actually wasn't sure like if they had O365 or like specific software. So if you're somewhat generic, that can make it more legitimate looking. Also, I gave them a deadline, so I asked them to sign up at the end of that week essentially. That'll make it more urgent, so it doesn't just sit in their inbox. So I sent this out early on a Monday. That time is not correct in the timestamp, but within like an hour of sending it out, I immediately saw someone put their credentials in there. It looked like valid domain creds. And yeah, so the first thing I did is did some black box discovery. I looked for their IP space and everything, did DNS enumeration, and I saw they had a VPN portal. They actually had two. One was vpn.client.com. The other one was dev/vpn.client.com. So I immediately tried to log into the first one, and it required a client-side certificate, and it also had multi-factor authentication. So I was like, ah, dang it, I'm gonna have to call the guy or whatever. But I tried just for the heck of it to log into the dev portal, and it immediately worked. So what I'm thinking is they just didn't enable MFA on that second portal because it was for for like testing or whatever. But because it was it was on the internet, I was able to log in. So I was testing on a Mac for this engagement, and I just downloaded the client, and I was able to actually connect to their network. Which this is like my first time doing this, so I was like losing my mind. I was like telling Matt like as this was happening. It was pretty cool. So yeah, I just made sure that it was actually pulling an IP address and everything. I went ahead and told the client, and they were like, "Yeah, man, just like see how far you can get. Just like don't DOS anything, whatever." So I was pretty excited because it was the very first day of the engagement, and I had plenty of time. So at this point, it was basically an internal pen test. So for post exploitation, the first thing you want to do typically is establish persistence, whether that's with C2 command and control or dumping creds or whatever. And part of this test, they really wanted us to show like what an attacker could do. So not just get DA if you can, like actually show what you can access, what an attacker would try and exfil, etc. So the first thing I did is actually, the client didn't actually whitelist us. So I like tried to access the page from their network and realized Proofpoint had actually blocked it. They lied to me. But somehow like that first email actually made it through. So I like showed it to him like, hey man, like you didn't actually whitelist me. So that was kind of funny, but like my page was very, very basic, and Proofpoint like immediately found that it was stealing credentials, which I thought was pretty cool. Their network was actually very flat, so from the VPN subnet, I could actually reach everything. So this was their IP cameras, their security cameras. I was able to just look at them. They had default creds, of course, so I could like mess around with them. Some of them were actually live streaming like 1080p video, which is just crazy. The point of contact's car is this one here. So when I showed him in the report, he freaked out. He's like, "Holy crap! You can see see our cars and stuff." And they had other pictures of like their parking deck and stuff like that. So you could, I mean, the attacker could identify points of egress to the building. Look at different things, kind of identify loading docks and stuff like that, places where they could possibly get into the building, etc. So before I dropped anything to disk, because I wanted to try and avoid that, because I only had one set of credentials, the first thing I did is use a tool called Talon. It's similar, there's other tools out there, like Kerberoot, whatever. Essentially what it does is you can enumerate validate users that exist using Kerberos pre-auth. So I scraped LinkedIn, and I had a list of about, I think, 1,200 or so usernames, and I threw them with Talon against one of the DCs, and I was able to enumerate about 300 valid users. And then I immediately turned around and did a password guess with the client name, the year 2020 exclamation point, and I got, I think, 9 total hits. So that's what the screenshot is. That way, if the compromised user account that I was using, if it was locked out or anything, I would have other accounts to use, so I wouldn't lose access to the network. So after that, just for the sake of it, I performed a curb roasting attack, and there were a number of SPNs that one of the hashes that I captured from that was a domain administrator, of course, and I was able to crack that in like 17 minutes. And when I was looking at the user account, it turns out they were also an enterprise administrator. So also looking at the account, the password was in conflict with the domain password policy, of course, but it was the date that the password was set in 2012. So that was pretty bad. Like an EA account, it's 8 years old and it's like just the crappiest password you've ever seen. Um, so at this point, I didn't even need to use command and control because I had complete access to the network. So I dumped some additional DA accounts just to to show impact, etc. Unfortunately, I can't really show it, but we were able to get into because there were two guys doing the internal network. I was doing social engineering, but because I was already there, they helped me do PostX, and we got all kinds of medical records. They had a database with credit cards and social security numbers. We dumped like all of that. There were like 1.2 million um, records total or something like that. So, oops, in addition to the what we already talked about, because I had so much time, I just kind of looked for additional attack paths and stuff, and it was pretty bad. They had a lot of stuff on there that was very vulnerable. For example, they had a default Tomcat manager login, which allows you to upload a WAR file. You can basically upload a web shell. So I did that. I was able to gain system access to that machine. I dumped creds on that had 2 service accounts, one of which was also a DA. We also went through Office 365, or rather OWA, for the compromised users that we had. 2 of them were doctors. We had medical records, x-rays, you had social security numbers, plenty of medical information, PI, plain text passwords, etc. That was pretty much it for the phishing. It was crazy. Like I went from pretty much nothing to enterprise admin in the first like day of the test, I think, and then the post-X we pretty much spent the the rest of the week and a half that I had for that. And as part of the social engineering, we also did phone pretexting, which I hadn't even started by the time I had compromised the internal network. So. But yeah, we still did it. What I did for this is I went to LinkedIn and looked at the company and found a bunch of their IT help desk people, created a list of those, and kind of like looked at their names, looked at ones that were might fit my voice and stuff. And like one of the guys was he was like an intern or something. He was like 19, 20. So what we did is we called, I think it was like 20 different people. We called them and said we were like, I was an intern. But one of my friends also called, and we got, I think, out of 20 people, about 10 of them answered, and we got 9 passwords. Like they would just give us their passwords over the phone. And we did a similar thing to the phishing. We said we were, deploying a new cloud platform. We just needed them to we needed to authenticate as the user or something like that. I can't really remember, but they like a lot of them just gave us their their credentials. Some of them we would help them navigate to the page that we had set up and have them log in or whatever. And out of the users that we spoke to, only one of them actually tried to like validate who I was, and she actually did a really good job. She was like an HR manager or something, and I wasn't really used to being challenged by a user, so she like asked like who I was again, and I said my name. It was one of the guys I was pretending to be, and she asked for my phone extension because she said the number was coming from the hospital, which that wasn't where IT was, which is pretty. She was definitely paying attention, so I just fudged like a number. I was like, oh, it's extension 302 or something. And she's like, no, that doesn't match the global address list. She's like, who the hell are you? And so I ended up basically saying, I was with Optiv, and basically told her to, to talk to the point of contact just to validate who we actually were and stuff. So that was pretty cool. But the rest of them didn't do that. So, but yeah, that was pretty much it for this assessment. Again, yeah, pretty much the point of entry was lack of multi-factor authentication. If it wasn't for that, like if they didn't have that dev portal exposed, it probably would have been fine. We still could have called people and tried to bypass that. But yeah, once we were on the network, it was pretty much game over. So yeah, that was it. Pretty short. Just thought it was a cool story to share with everyone. Um, Kind of indicative of what you can do when you have a network that's not really secure. They didn't really have much of a security team or anything in place either. So yeah, if you have any questions, hit me up. Otherwise, that's pretty much it for me.